Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 20 of the Nerd Federation podcast, your weekly podcast for some things pro wrestling and video games related. I am your host, Will Hernandez, and they say only 1% of podcasts make it to episode 20. But here we are. We're here at episode 20, and it is coming up on WrestleMania weekend. We're just a few days away from WrestleMania 40, which is kind of crazy to think about, that I've seen just about all 40 WrestleManias in my lifetime. It really does say a lot about the staying power of WWE, and I am definitely in this episode going to get into WrestleMania weekend, really, and talk about the matches for the weekend that I am looking forward to between Ring of Honor on Friday, New Japan Pro Wrestling on Saturday, and of course, the main event, and that is WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia, that dirty, dirty city this weekend. So, really looking forward to giving my take on what's happening this weekend. And I am not going to go through every match because I don't do match reviews on here. So there's no reason for me to be going through every match this weekend. But I am going to kind of walk you through what I'm most excited for, what I'm going to nerd out about this weekend. And that's really the name of the game here for this show. But before I get into that, as I start getting my timestamps ready here. By the way, I am recording this podcast because I'm just kind of testing out some stuff to really make some clips. This is definitely not going on YouTube. That is just not going to happen. At least I don't think it is. It might be on YouTube Short. So if you do want to follow me over on YouTube, we can do that. And already I am kind of going off the rails here with the topic. But so I do want to start the show with a word about CM Punk. And I've mentioned on this podcast before how CM Punk in some ways reinvigorated my passion for pro wrestling. And this was way back in 2006. And the reason for that is because his introduction came to a more mainstream audience when he debuted with ECW in 2006, which obviously was owned by WWE. And it had me doing research on where he came from. And I learned about the original Ring of Honor. And basically, the rest is history from there. And if you want to go back to episode 2, I basically explain all of it there. But I am going to say one thing. You fast forward to today, and I think the one word that I can use to describe CM Punk at this point and where he stands in my fandom in professional wrestling is disappointment. I'm disappointed with that things didn't work out with AEW. And there's blame to go around on both sides. Don't get me wrong there. There is no doubt about that. But I will say one thing about him as a person. Don't forget that he left his best friend out to dry when WWE sued the both of them after Punk's appearance on what's now that infamous episode of the Art of Wrestling podcast, which, by the way, kind of influences what I do here and why I do this now, but that's a different story for another time. But I do think everything that went down with him and Cabana in the aftermath of that, if you aren't aware, Cabana basically sued Punk because Punk promised to pay for Cabana's legal fees with WWE suing him, and then Punk countersued, but then both parties decided to throw the suits out the window. So again, just think about that. Keep that in context here with everything. But a lot of the pro wrestling social media channels are talking because Punk did an interview on Monday with Ariel Helwani. He's more of an MMA guy, but he does follow pro wrestling. And he had Punk on the show on Monday, and the aftermath to that has been strong on both sides of the aisle. But here's the thing with that. It kind of really doesn't matter in a lot of ways, because WWE and Punk fans are going to have their opinions on what he said, and AEW fans are going to have their opinions on it. And there's nothing really that can be said to either of those camps to change their mind. And in the past few days, I've seen a lot of mudslinging on both sides over it, and it's sad. And really, at this point, I'm kind of over it. I mean, honestly, I'm just over the bullshit. I've seen so many bad faith comments on social media from WWE fans, particularly on Threads, which is supposed to be the more, how can I say, cuddly social media network. But you got these people that are making bad faith arguments. And I really do think a lot of it is because it drives engagement to their platform, and engagement equals cash. Because when I see some of the takes on it, it's just ridiculous. We get it. You're a WWE fan. You think Tony Khan's a fraud for whatever reason. And I get it. He brings some of the stuff upon himself. But there are some takes about, oh, Tony's wasting money. He could have used that money to not cut people. Don't do that. Don't do that, because listen, how many times have we talked about WWE cutting folks and them having money coming out their asses that they could have used to keep talent? So I don't want to hear that argument on the other side of things. Anyway, the one thing I will say about Punk, about what he said, and which is something that I actually agree with. And there were some things that he said that I agree with. I'm not saying that everything he said was bullshit, but some people were saying, oh, Punk's basically working everybody. It's just whatever. It's just, when you're in this industry, I just feel like there's always this fine line between something that's a work and something that's a shoot. Anyway, but I do agree in the sense of that AEW does need a boss. And I think about it in the perspective and the lens of this hat that I'm wearing right now. And for the audio listeners, it's a New York Mets hat. And it reminds me of Steve Cohen with the Mets. Steve Cohen bought the Mets a few years ago. Guy's a billionaire from the hedge fund world, right? And while he does make some decisions, he's hired people to make decisions for him. And I wish Tony Khan would be the same way in that regard. You can be the money guy. That's great. Throw all the money you out there that you want. And he's done that. Okada, Mercedes, Moxley, Jericho. Like, he spent the money to get the stars to his program, but hire people to run the creative of the shows while you worry about the day-to-day operations of the company. You worry about negotiating a new deal for Warner, Time Warner to Discovery. Like, take care of that stuff. Have somebody come in and worry about the creative. I'm not saying that you can't have say in your own promotion about what gets on TV, but it would be better if there were actual pro wrestling people from the industry running that part of your company. I don't think that's ever going to happen, unfortunately, but I think that it would be the ideal situation. But again, you never know what's going to happen in that sense. And one other thing I want to say before I go into this WrestleMania weekend stuff. To the people that are calling Tony Khan a money mark, here's what I have to say to you. I think that is such a childish thing to be throwing around. We are all fucking marks. Every single one of us. Every single one of us that makes any kind of content that talks about pro wrestling, we're fucking marks. Whether it's this podcast, whether it's a YouTube show, whether it's somebody specifically talking about pro wrestling on social media, we're fucking marks. The people that are calling Tony a money mark are marks. Triple H is a fucking mark. Vince McMahon is a mark for himself in more ways than one. And we all fucking know that. And by the way, another thing I will say, pro wrestlers absolutely hate when fans like us start throwing around these terms. I'm telling you, they fucking do. We don't work in the business. We just don't. We think that we do. I think some of us wish that we could work in the business, but we don't. So, to be throwing those fucking words around, it really is just, I think it's stupid. And I'm just as guilty of it. I am completely just as guilty of it. But to be going around and calling people money marks and shit, shut the fuck up. Seriously, just shut up. Enough. Because all you're doing is you're flaming the social media bullshit over and over again by using language like that. So please, just stop it. Enough with that crap. Anyway, go ahead and say Mark in front of somebody like Taz, and he will verbally rip you to shreds. If you listen to his podcast back in the day, you know exactly what I mean by that. So, let's get to some actual WrestleMania. And it is WrestleMania week. We all know that. It is a Tuesday night as I record this podcast. I had thought about doing a special podcast this week, but that just didn't happen. I just don't have the time, to be quite completely honest with you. Next week, I'm actually going to be recording a day early because I have some things going on in the city for work that I have to be in the city Tuesday night. So we're not going to have the normal podcast time slot next week. We will have a normal podcast. It's just not going to be on the same day. I'm not going to record the same day that I usually do. So the way I'm approaching this episode is simple. I'm not going to preview every match on these shows that I plan to watch this weekend because I think that's boring. But what I want to do is basically highlight the top matches I'm excited to watch between both nights of WrestleMania, Sakura Genesis, and the Ring of Honor show on Friday. And also keep in mind my casualness in my approach to Ring of Honor and WWE because they are not shows that I am watching consistently as far as the week-to-week programming. And also you can forget about Collision this weekend. I mean, I know this is the bad thing about running a WWE, why AEW running a Saturday show because of situations like this. I understand that they changed the time. It's not going to be on until like 11:30 on Saturday night. I don't care. It's going to be recorded. If I watch it, I watch it. If I don't watch it, I don't watch it. And everybody knows that I love me some AEW and that it's my preferred destination. But I'm sorry, guys, you don't matter on Saturday. That is just the reality of the situation. So let's start with the Ring of Honor here as I get my timestamps going. So, and I've said this a few times about Ring of Honor, especially, you know, it needs to be its own separate thing from AEW. But that being said, the Ring of Honor pay-per-views are usually entertaining. I've been to some old Ring of Honor pay-per-views, the ones before, you know, pre-Tony, and I've been to one TK-owned Ring of Honor pay-per-view, and I haven't been disappointed. Honestly, the times that I've gone, I've always had a good time, even when they were doing the house show circuit, basically, but they were making them into DVDs when they would do the Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing, you know, very similar to what WWE does now, but they would run the road show essentially. And I would often, when they were in town in Chicago, and I've told this story before, I would go to I forget where it was. It was just south of, I think it was Bridgeview. It's very close to where the MLS team plays, if I'm not mistaken. It's just a southwest Chicago suburb. But I would go there for the shows, and to this day, the best tag team match I think that I've ever seen in person was the Briscoe brothers versus the Motor City Machine Guns for the tag team championship. Man, that match just fucking blew me away. So, yeah, Ring of Honor's usually a good time, even in the Tony Khan era of Ring of Honor. So, as I record this is a 6-match show. I have to imagine that we're going to get a couple of other matches added by Friday, but, we'll kind of see how that plays out. Now, this is going to surprise people about the match that I'm looking forward to the most on this particular show, but I do think for me, personally, again, I've got to say that, it's Queen Aminata versus Billy Starks for the women's television title. And the reason I'm most excited about that match is because Queen Aminata has become someone to watch over the past several weeks, not only with the AEW stuff, what she's done in AEW, but now what she's done in Ring of Honor. And I think they know that they have something on their hands with Queen Aminata. And I think this is the reason, one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to it is because I want to see what they kind of decide. Do you keep her down there, quote unquote, down there in Ring of Honor as a television champion, which I think would be really good for her to get the reps in, to get the experience in? Or she has this valiant fight against Billy Starks. She loses to Billy Starks, does not achieve the connotation of the first women's Ring of Honor TV champion. And then she becomes a player up in AEW. It's interesting. It's an interesting, I don't really know what's better. I am going to say that she does win the title on Friday and has a pretty good run with it before maybe she eventually loses to Billy Starks. Because that kind of seems like a natural kind of ebb and flow of things. Again, I'm completely talking on my ass right now, just as far as the storylines that are heading into this show on Friday. But I'm just looking at this from on paper, from the clips that I see on social media, and what I know of Queen Aminata, having watched her wrestle quite a few times. That's just kind of my best educated guess on the situation. So, believe it or not, that is number one. That is the top match that I'm looking forward to on Friday's show, the Supercard of Honor. The other two, probably not surprising. Eddie Kingston versus Mark Briscoe. For the Ring of Honor title, that that's going to be a banger. I mean, I don't even have to. We've seen those guys enough separately on Ring of Honor. I mean, on AEW television. And now they're going to be involved in this trios match at AEW Dynasty. It's going to be Adam Copeland and Eddie Kingston and Mark Briscoe versus the House of Black. That's going to happen at AEW Dynasty. So you got this dynamic. I mean, I can see a situation, honestly, where Briscoe does win the title on Friday, and then there might be some animosity between those two when they team up with Copeland for that match, and then maybe it's a possibility that animosity causes that team to match against the House of Black. And then you can do a return match later on, and then maybe Mark wins again to really establish himself as the Ring of Honor champion. But I expect that to be a very hard-hitting match on Friday night. The other one that I'm looking forward to that I gotta say that piques my interest is the Lee Johnson versus Kyle Fletcher match. And mainly it's because of Kyle Fletcher, because we saw that amazing match that he had with Will Ospreay. By the way, Fletcher is the Ring of Honor men's television champion, which this is the problem. Talk about a segue. This is the problem with having these Ring of Honor folks on AEW television, because I think personally that when these champions lose on AEW television, that it doesn't look good, because you kind of make them seem like those Ring of Honor championships don't mean shit because they're a level lower than the guys and the girls on the AEW roster. I thought the same thing recently when the Undisputed Kingdom, when Bennett and Taven lost the match against Best Friends. So you got these guys who are the champions, who are the tag team champions, but they're losing on AEW television, and I don't think that brings value to those titles. But I'm expecting this to be a barn burner because I know that both these guys are athletic. This is that match. This is the athletic, the athletic match of this card where you're probably going to see some crazy shit in the ring from these two. As far as the other matches, I'm like, Athena versus, oh my God, why am I blanking about who, Sheeta, oh my God. You got Athena versus Sheeta. That match, listen, I know some people are excited about the Stardom people. I just don't care. I don't care. I'm sorry. I don't care. Give me a reason to care about Stardom. Give me a reason to care about CMLL. I just don't care. Listen, it's great that AEW's the promotion that is mixing and matching different promotions out there in the world. But I just don't care. And that's okay. It's not for me. It's great that other people can enjoy it, but I don't care at the end of the day. And that's fine. It's not really a big deal. But pause right here for a sip of water, because I needed that. Anyway, so that's gonna be it for Friday night. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to watch that show live. TBD on that one, but let's move over to Sakura Genesis and talk about that show, because that is Saturday morning our time. And I mentioned before how this is basically a 6-match show, despite having 9 on the card. And for me personally, I'm looking forward to 3 matches in particular. First one, I am so interested to see how this is going to go. By the way, these are the last 3 matches on the card. This is the reason why I like New Japan, because they basically put out what the card's going to be and the match order is going to be. Nobody else really does that, at least as far as I'm aware. So you've got Shota Umino and Moxley versus Ren Narita and Jack Perry. Let me repeat that. Shota Umino and Moxley versus Jack Perry and Ren Narita. Now, speaking of CM Punk, we all know the situation with Jack Perry and him being quote unquote fired or even suspended from AEW. He shows up in New Japan in February at the show in February. Actually, it was the show in January, because it was the same night as the TNA pay-per-view. So he shows up in January. He enters into the New Japan Cup, gets knocked out very early on in the second round. Comes out and he is with the House and Torture. That happened in between that whole thing. And we know the following week, Jack Perry's going to be in the States wrestling at Windy City Riot, which is a New Japan show that is happening in Chicago. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, let me go check my sources on this. Truly New Japan 1972, by the way, that Perry is wrestling Ishii at Windy City Riot. Let me just check to see if that is indeed correct. No, I'm sorry. He is wrestling Shota Umino on that show. It's actually Nick Nemeth that's wrestling Ishii. So, and don't forget, Moxie's going to be in that card because he's wrestling Naito on that card too. So that's going to be a hell of a card, by the way. That's something I definitely want to make sure that I watch at some point. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because Umino and Narita are part of this new wave of New Japan folks that the company is really getting behind to kind of help be those folks who are replacing the Ospreys and replacing the Okadas and folks like that. So it's a big match. I think it's a big match because we're going to see Jack Perry mix it up with somebody who is a big name on the AEW roster. And he's also being thrown into this match with two guys that are wrestlers that New Japan is really looking to help grow the promotion. So that's why I think that match is going to be so interesting. And I just want to see Moxley and Perry in the ring and kind of see what happens there. Because to me, that's intrigue. That's exciting. That's storytelling. And you know, at some point, that is going to cross over to AEW. At least I think so. Forbidden Door's right around the corner. It's coming in June. Something's going to happen there with Perry. Perry's going to be on that show, I think, one way or the other. Whether he's in a match or interferes or something. But that time is coming at some point. And I think it's going to happen as soon as June. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, second match that I'm looking forward to, which would be the 8th match of the night, and that's Shingo Takagi, jeez, I always mess it up, versus Evil for the open weight title. And I mean, listen, if you know who those guys are and you've watched those guys wrestle, you know what you're getting in that match, and there's nothing really wrong with that. It's okay. It's okay. Not saying that the match is going to be just okay, but you know you're going to get a hard-hitting New Japan style pro wrestling match, and I am all for it. Okay, final match from Sakura Genesis that I'm looking forward to, and that is the main event, which is Naito versus Yoshitsuji for the IWGP Heavyweight title. And to add some more intrigue into this match, it's really one of the few times in the past few years that we've gotten wrestlers fighting each other from the same faction, because that's not something that really happens too often. And the reason why we have this is because Yoshitsuji won the New Japan Cup, and the prize for winning the New Japan Cup is that you get an automatic championship match against the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. So that's why we've got this going on Saturday. And it's also interesting, again, as I just mentioned with Shota Umino and Ren Narita, Yoshitsuji is one of these guys that New Japan is really putting on its back to carry the company forward. The funny thing is about Yoshitsuji, and I think some people, if you want to get an idea for this, you got to do some research on your own, but just like look at like the attire that he wears. And I can't remember if I mentioned this on the last podcast, but Yoshitsuji reminds me of Shinsuke Nakamura in a few ways. Kind of has the same look with the hair. He wears kind of flamboyant and loud colors like Shinsuke does. He was wearing leather pants in his New Japan Cup final match a few weeks back. So he's got kind of that vibe going on with him. And New Japan does this stuff sometimes. They do this stuff on purpose, I think, because they want to make the connection in the fans' minds between present day and what's happened in the past. So I think that's why I'm looking forward to this match, is because of those many factors of Tsuji being one of the chosen ones going forward, and the fact that this is happening against a former faction member, and it's Naito. So I think that really makes it intriguing at the end of the day. The other thing too is Tsuji has promised that he'll get rid of that belt that they're using right now as a New Japan title, because he keeps on saying whoever holds that particular version of the title has left for the US. Now, that's not saying that Naito's leaving if by some swerve that they have Tsuji go over in this match, but it's intriguing. Listen, you got to add some intrigue sometimes to these New Japan matches, because as I mentioned before, sometimes New Japan, actually not sometimes, most of the time, New Japan can be predictable. They can be very, very predictable. So I don't think they're going to go as far as to say he is not going to win, that he's going to win this match. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think that there are bigger things for Naito down the line, especially when it comes to Forbidden Door. Because I have a feeling when you go on that the Windy City Riot schedule, the match lineup for that show, there are no championship matches on the line, even though Naito is wrestling Moxie and Namath is wrestling Ishii. They're not considered title matches. They're special attraction matches. So my gut is telling me that Moxley is going to win at Windy City Riot, and then the rematch for the IWGP Heavyweight title is going to happen at Forbidden Door in supposedly New York City. So TBD on that. Well, here is the moment that I know you all have been waiting for, and that is WrestleMania 40. And before I do that, quick sip of water, because I've really been thirsty in this episode, and I've been talking for more than a half an hour straight. So, there's always a lot of hyperbole that WWE uses to hype up WrestleMania. It happens every year. Hell, pro wrestling companies in general use a lot of exaggeration to hype up WrestleMania cards. It just happens. Everybody wants to say this is the biggest and the best one. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that when you look at some of these matches. I will say this is probably the most intriguing WrestleMania that I am going to watch, and it's really for that night 2 main event. It's really because of Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, and whether Cody's going to finish the story. I can't even believe I just said that. God damn it. That's fucking WWE marketing. But I think that's the real intrigue. It's the whole thing of, is Roman going to retain again? Or is Cody going to finally get his a year later after losing the main event at WrestleMania 39 to Roman Reigns? And that really, at the end of the day, if you look at night 1 and you look at night 2, I might as well just start from there. That is the match I am looking forward to the most, really, of the whole weekend. Doesn't matter Ring of Honor, doesn't matter New Japan, WWE. That is the match. That is the match of the weekend for various reasons. That being said, if you look at the rest of the card, and I'm going to start with Saturday night, night one. And there's actually a decent amount of matches that I'm thinking about here. One of them is, oh my goodness, I want to call it a trios match. The trios match with Bianca Belair, Naomi, and Jade Cargill versus Damage Control, and that's Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi Sane. So, and the reason for that is simple. Jade Cargill. She's getting her WrestleMania match. She's going to have her WrestleMania moment. It took them long enough to get her in there after Royal Rumble. And look at that. She's having a match on a pay-per-view. What? How many months later? But you notice it's not a singles match. And I know there's been a lot being said about her not being ready and this, that, and the other thing. And she should have always been an NXT. She would have been the typical NXT candidate, but she was on TV for AEW. And listen, there were some Jade Cargill matches that were complete fucking trash. I mean, that's just the truth of it. She did get better as time went on. Don't get me wrong. But there were times where her matches were complete trash. That being said, I wish her nothing but the best. I mean, I want nothing but the best for her. I think as somebody who mostly watches AEW, she's the first person of consequence that has gone the other way. That started in AEW and has now been now in WWE. Cody doesn't count, obviously, because hey, he's done that. Been there, done that. As far as WWE, WrestleMania, yada 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 yada. So that's really one match that I am looking forward to on Saturday. The other one is Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch, mostly because I really enjoy those two. They're a joy to watch. For some reason, it's just kind of funny when you're checking in on WWE, at least for me, and you kind of see what the scuttlebutt is online. And there are a lot of people who are tired of Becky Lynch, which I find so fucking fascinating. I really do find that fascinating. But who do I think is going to win this one? I don't know. I mean, my gut is telling me that Rhea Ripley is going to retain here, that she's going to retain the Women's World Championship. That's what my gut says. But I think it will be an entertaining match nonetheless. Match number 3 on night 1. Probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most on night 1. Obviously, The Rock and Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. And it's just kind of funny how Seth and Cody are doing double duty. And you kind of, even Roman Reigns is doing double duty. And you wonder, God, let's just hope they don't get hurt on night 1. I mean, that's what it really, really comes down to. Everybody comes out of that match healthy. You know, this match is going to have a lot of gaga in it. And you know the main event of night 2 is going to have a lot of gaga in it. Because you know WWE tends to overbook these types of matches. Which is fine. Because that's really what pro wrestling is all about. It can be a little bit too much sometimes, but I'm not expecting anything less. I'm expecting a lot of gaga in this match. I think people are expecting Stone Cold and John Cena to come out to either on night 1 during this match or on night 2 during the main event. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how this all goes down. It's about the intrigue. It really is about the intrigue. These 4 guys don't need to do a lot in the ring. It's not necessary because of the story that's being told heading into this main event on night one. It's all about the intrigue. It's all about who's going to get their stipulation for night two in the main event. So I expect nothing less than a shit show for this match. And I mean that, I really do mean that in a good way. The other matches, Gunther, that should be Chad Gable as far as I'm concerned. Nothing against Sami Zayn. There is some intrigue with Jey Uso versus Jimmy Uso, I guess brother versus brother. And you know that the 6-pack ladder match is going to be a shit show. I mean, it's going to be a car crash. And they're supposed to be for undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships, but now, even if one of the belts come down, the match still continues. You got to get, it's just weird. They're setting something up for something weird for that. But shout out to Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne. They're going to get their WrestleMania moment finally, and it's fucking well-deserved. Same thing with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. Those guys are going to get their just desserts, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy for those guys. So, night two, I already talked about what's going to happen with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. That is definitely my most anticipated match of the weekend, so I don't really need to say much more about that. I am intrigued by the World Heavyweight Championship with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, because the way Drew has been throughout this time with the fire that he's been spitting on the mic week in and week out, the trolling that he's doing on social media, this man deserves his WrestleMania moment. And I do think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen on Sunday night, where Drew McIntyre is going to win that match and then head into Clash at the Castle in Scotland as the World Heavyweight Champion. So that's another match that I'm looking forward to. I'll give you two more. LA Knight versus AJ Styles. And it's mostly because I'm an AJ Styles mark. You see, there's nothing wrong with using that word in that context. I'm an AJ Styles mark. So anytime you put AJ Styles on the screen, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to watch that match, because I still think he's one of the best in the world. So looking forward to that, him versus LA Knight. The other one I am also looking forward to is that United States triple threat match between Logan Paul, the champion, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens. Again, big Kevin Owens mark. Jesus. Big Kevin Owens mark. Have loved Kevin Owens for a very, very long time. He's one of my favorite wrestlers ever. So I am definitely looking forward to that match. Tough to tell who's going to win that one. Don't really know. I don't know if it really matters. They probably will take the championship off of Logan Paul. I think it would be cool if Randy Orton gets, by the way, United States Championship. That's what we're talking about here. I think it would be cool to see Randy Orton get that title and then maybe do a Cope Open type of thing. Wink, wink. I know your motherfuckers at WWE watch AEW and vice versa. So let's not pretend that doesn't happen. But I think it would be cool if Randy Orton did win the match on Sunday night. So that's really it, guys. I mean, it's WrestleMania weekend. It's something that I look forward to, WrestleMania just in general. It's crazy, even though I am not really watching WWE the way I used to, and I probably won't ever again, because honestly, I just don't have the time to be doing that. There is something about WrestleMania that is intriguing. I'm jazzed about it. Despite not being the WWF fan that I was for a good 30 to 35 years, WrestleMania is still a big deal to me. And it's a nostalgia thing. And you know what? Nostalgia sells. Hell, The Rock. That's all you have to say to somebody about WrestleMania weekend, and that's probably the reason why they are watching. I know plenty of people who are tuning in to WrestleMania this weekend because of The Rock. And that is powerful and that is good. But the other thing that's good about it is that the pro wrestling industry itself has made it into a week-long event. And that stuff is starting. I might order another show. The House of Glory show looks somewhat intriguing to me, I have to say. I was looking at that card today. I can't remember anything that I saw on it, but it was intriguing. I know Mustafa Ali is going to be on that card. So there's stuff out there that I hope that I get a chance to watch. I'm going to be heading to my brother's to watch night one, and then I'll head back up here to the Hudson Valley to watch night two. So that is going to do it for the pro wrestling portion of the podcast. I'm going to take a quick break and come back and chat about some video games and what I've been playing, which is mainly MLB The Show and Prince of Persia. Prince of Persia. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll be right back. Thanks. And welcome back to episode number 20 of the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez. I've had my protein shake and I am ready to go here to record the second and last portion of this week's show. By the way, I wasn't kidding when I said earlier that only 1% of podcasts make it to episode 20. So nobody's listening, but hey, I've done 20 of these things so far, and I guess I can't be too mad at that I'm, keeping this going. But anyway, it's a Tuesday night, like I mentioned before. It is a rainy Tuesday night here, as I am actually waiting for the Mets game to start. So things kind of worked out this week as far as the Mets were concerned. I have to admit, I'm still a little worried about this podcast going forward because it's really a time thing. It's really a matter of finding the time to do enough to feel as though I am giving you something in regards to this podcast, because gotta watch wrestling, gotta play video games, gotta read as much as I can about both subjects and just keep up to date and on top of different things. And watching a baseball game sometimes does get in the way of that stuff. But I will say, thank God for the pitch clock, because now we don't have 3.5, 4 hour games anymore, which is quite nice. Also, there's just a lot of technology that's at my disposal now, as far as I can watch a game on my iPad, have a game playing on my iPad while I'm playing a game. So that's not really, plus there's the portal as well. So there are options there as far as being able to do multiple things as once. And it's funny because as I am recording this podcast, I've got MLB TV playing on the TV in the office. And right now I am watching, well, not really watching because I'm recording here, but I do have the Braves and White Sox game on my TV at the moment. So this is actually relevant to the conversation, because this part of the show, the video game portion of the show, is really going to be talking about what I've been playing recently. And the reason why I say it's associated is because I've been playing MLB The Show 24, and this was an easy decision for me because the game is available on Xbox Game Pass. As you know, for those who are unaware, but a few years back, Major League Baseball made the decision, basically forced Sony's hand and said, hey, if you want to keep this license, you have to bring the game to other platforms. And that opened up the gates for MLB The Show to now be on Xbox and the Switch, which is crazy when you think about it. I always find it weird when you're playing MLB The Show on Xbox, how the opening splash screen is PlayStation Santa Monica. Is it no San Diego studio? It is very strange. It's probably one of the stranger quirks in video games. So to see that PlayStation Studio screen it's kind of funny in many ways. But I have as you could imagine, I have a very, very long history with baseball games and sports games in general. I'm talking about going all the way back to RBI Baseball for Nintendo. Remember those little fat little round guys that were in that game? So you want to talk about somebody who has seen the evolution of the genre of the baseball video game. I am definitely the person to talk to because I've played it all. I played different variations. I was thinking earlier today, all the different variations of baseball that I've played in video game form, starting with RBI Baseball. And they were different. I think there was another 2 or 3 RBIs that I played after that. There was Sports Talk Baseball for the Genesis, if you remember that one. That was another good one that I played a lot. There was also something on the Commodore 64. It was the Sporting News baseball game, which I played a lot of back in the day when I was playing a fair number of games on my Commodore 64 back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s was when I was really playing a lot on Commodore 64. Of course, there's Bases Loaded. And the fun story about the Bases Loaded stuff is that I used to keep my own stats for Bases Loaded. And that was always a great game to kind of fall back on and play. Obviously, you've got the variations of EA Sports and MVP baseball, and then eventually it was turned into like just a college baseball game, which was kind of weird and unique. And really, for a long time, I did not play any baseball games because as somebody who really had only an Xbox for a while, I missed out on the show for a long time until I finally got the PlayStation Pro, PS4 Pro. I want to say, what year was this? I'm going to say 2013 or 2014 was when I finally really took my first dive into the PlayStation ecosystem like full time. Had a PS2, but I don't think I played any baseball games for PlayStation or PlayStation 2. Not that I can recall. Maybe MVP, the MVP series. I distinctly remember Manny Ramirez on the cover of one of those games. But yeah, I mean, it's really been the show, and that's it. There was that arcade style baseball game, The Bigs. If you remember that, it was really popular on the Xbox 360. And man, I played the shit out of that game. That was a fun game. Even though it had this arcade style way to it, I thought it was a really fun game. But yeah, it's been interesting to play the show on and off the past few years. I think I've definitely have checked it out every year that it's been on Game Pass, just really out of pure curiosity. But kind of the way, and it's funny, I've got this weird thing about playing sports games now because I feel as though I'm missing out on playing the story-driven stuff when I'm playing a sports game. But it used to be all I played back in the day. I used to be that guy. I used to be that guy that was just a Madden Call of Duty guy. And I think I did that for, I don't know, maybe a good 4 to 5 years where those were really the only games that I played. But thankfully, my palette has extended over the years. But the one thing that's just funny is just when you look at these sports games in general and just how much more complicated the controls have gotten over the years. I mean, really, and I'll talk about MLB The Show specifically, but it's been great that they give you, when you first jump into the game, they give you a variety of ways that you can play the game as far as pitching and hitting are concerned. And they're basically based off of various ways that they did it in previous iterations of the game. When I am pitching, I like using the meter thing. You gotta press the meter towards the end and then time it to where you get the best kind of pitch. I cannot do the whole like little moving the analog, the control stick to do the pitching. That's like, to me, that's like hardcore shit as far as doing the analog stick control to do the pitch and doing a little motion of like a fastball or a curveball, splitter, changeup, yada, 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 yada. So I like doing the pitching with the meter, and then the hitting, I basically freestyle it in the way of I'm doing the timing hitting. That is because I think that is probably the most realistic and the most thing that I'm comfortable with, because it reminds me of my days of being in the batter's box. And there is a lot of frustration when you are doing the timing hitting and you know that you're right on top of a pitch, but either miss it or foul it back, or you're just late. And that's kind of like, that's where I think the realism of the game comes in, because as somebody who has played baseball, played a lot of little league, I played all through high school, and I played in some hardball leagues, both in New York and Chicago when I got older. That kind of realism of being on top of a pitch and being able to time it, as far as a fastball is concerned, as far as a curveball is concerned, and change it. If you play baseball, you know what that is like. So there's a real sense of frustration when you swing too early or swing too late on a pitch. And that's definitely my favorite way to hit in MLB The Show. I've tried doing the zone hitting, where you've kind of like move the zone as you're swinging, and I don't like that. That might be a little bit more realistic as far as being able to hit to all fields, up the middle, to the right, to the left, try to get a ground ball, try to lift the ball in the air for a fly ball or for a home run. But I feel as though the timing mechanism, the timing hitting, for me personally, is probably the most realistic out of the options that they give you on the show. And going on to kind of the way these games have changed over the years, and really the biggest thing that I kind of can't stand, even though I'm playing that mode now, is just making these Supercard teams. I mean, that's kind of, that's kind of what they are. It's the ultimate team thing. It's like the ultimate Madden, the ultimate FIFA. This is like the ultimate The Show team, where you're start off with like this starter pack of terrible baseball players. I mean, let's be realistic. Some of these guys are rated in like the high 50s and low 60s. And then basically, as you complete these tasks, you get points and you get opportunities to open up fresh packs of cards, which is kind of fun. I mean, there is, and I see now why these things are addictive in some ways, is because you're hoping you get a player that you're going to be able to kind of build your team around and have better overall stats. So like that part of it is fun. And I do see the appeal of that. Right now, I am playing the game mode where you're building the super team type of thing, and you have to go through the little tasks. And I think the reason why I jumped into that is because, one, I really didn't want to understand how that portion of the game worked, because it's something that I've shied away from over the years and gone straight to like the franchise mode, which to me is the tried and true mode there on the show. So, but the card system is kind of fun, and you play a 25 game season that is 3 innings each. Each game is 3 innings each. 2 of the 4 or 5 games that I played already have already gone into extra innings. And it's really easy to go into extra innings, because if nobody scores in 3 innings, I mean, shit, you're hopping into extra innings. It's always weird because you're playing an extra inning game and you're in the fourth inning and you already have the free runner on second base. So that's kind of funny in some ways. By the way, you do have the option to turn off the free runner in the in the settings, but I don't know. I just listen. I want to play the game as much as a simulation as possible. So I'm going to leave in the rules for the picking off the guys and for the actual ghost runner on second base. The one thing I haven't seen yet, and maybe I should test this out coming up, is because it's the pitch clock. I don't think I've seen that in any shape come up in the game. I think it's because I get the ball and I'm ready to pitch it. You know, there's really no time for it to for the pitch clock to wind down. But I think the next time that I do play, I will look out for that and I will report back later. But as I mentioned, I'm playing that particular game mode with the cards. And honestly, I'm trying to build a good enough team to be able to play people online. And because I don't think baseball games are the rare ones where I go online to play people. I usually don't. I usually only do it in basketball, NBA games, NBA 2K, and in Madden. Those are really the only two sports games that I've ever played online. I think occasionally I did play the MLB The Show online just to kind of see how that worked, and that was a trip. And I want to try it again, but I want to make sure that I build up my team. And then they have all these other modes on MLB The Show. You know, you got the Road to the Show, and they're doing things a little bit differently where you can like play a female character to get to the show, which I think is actually pretty cool because I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I do think that we are going to get a female Major League Baseball player. I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know what position they will play, but evolution's a funny thing where we're going to get, and I'm talking about a biological female that is going to make a Major League roster at some point. At least get close. At least get to the point where she's going to be in the minor leagues trying to make her way to the major leagues. I truly do believe that we are going to see that at some point. I think at some point I will go back and play some of the modes, like I said, Road to the Show, and then there's the Road to the Postseason thing, which is cool. Is actually what I started playing a little bit last year, and I jumped in there with the Mets. That part of it is cool, but I think the biggest thing with this game is just the way they capture the realism in a Major League Baseball game. And again, as somebody who has played the game and who wrote about the game when I was a newspaper reporter, I'm not saying I'm like this expert, but let's just put it this way. Baseball's a sport I know best. From a perspective of what I think is the best way it should be played, players, news, analysis, that has always been my number one. So when you see the kind of like the little things in the game, which I think are pretty cool, and I'll give you an example right now. There was a play last night where I think I had a runner in scoring position, and it was a single up the middle, I think, and the guy was coming around third and had to slide headfirst into home. So the next at bat, you go and you see the little like trail where the guy slid over, where he slid over the batter's box. So the paint, the chalk for the batter's box is missing. And then you see kind of the groove, a little bit of a groove where he goes over home plate, and it stays like that for the game. And I think it's little things like that I love about video games, where there's a sense of realism. For as cartoony and unrealistic how video games can be sometimes, there's also that part of when they get kind of that realism part of it right. And MLB The Show does that in spades. And how the fuck don't they not, considering they've been making this game now for, I don't know, maybe 10 years? Maybe a little bit more than that, but it really is something. It's something else to watch. So yeah, I mean, listen, this is a no-brainer if you're a baseball fan. It's the down, especially if you're on Xbox, it's to download this game and play it. And yeah, I would love to play somebody. If you're listening to this, it's Logan Hero 20 on PlayStation. That's my name. So hey, add me. I'm sorry, I'm playing this on Xbox. You see where my mind went? It's Jon Snow 20. That's my gamer tag on Xbox. I don't think you can do crossplay, which I think is kind of stupid, to be honest. At least I don't think you can. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look up if you can actually do crossplay. You would think that you would be able to do that in a game like this, but TBD. I'll get back to you on that one. So yeah, that's basically what I've got to say about MLB The Show. And the other thing I want to talk about quickly before I wrap stuff up is, as this is clearly a shorter part of the show this week, and that was just talking about Prince of Persia again. And I think, listen, I'm still enjoying the hell out of this game. There is no doubt about it, but there were a couple of times where I was stuck in certain scenarios, on certain levels, on certain parts of the game. And the first time around, I figured it out. And I've been proud of myself. I've been surprised. I made a note here because I want to make sure I got this point across. As somebody who really doesn't play Metroidvanias outside of the 2 or 3 I've played in my life, like a Celeste and Ori. As somebody who does not like puzzles in games, because I get super frustrated, and I am worried about Indiana Jones in that respect, because I know there are going to be a shit ton of puzzles in that game. That being said, I've been surprised that I've been able to figure out some of the puzzles and traversal without a guide. And that's the thing too, with the way this works, the way this game is laid out. You've got, what's the best way to say this? Some of the puzzles, some of the traversal in itself is a puzzle. Like, how do I get up to this platform? Or how do I move these things in a way that makes sense that I can get up to this level? There was a point, I guess this is not necessarily a spoiler, but you're making your way up this, I want to say you're making your way up through levels of a palace, let's say. And there was a point where I had to get up to a certain level. And I'm not talking about like level 1, level 2, level 3, or your power level. I'm just talking about a level, a platform, where I had to basically, sorry as I'm moving in my chair, I had to take a step back. I had to look like, okay, if I do this and I do that, I think this will work. And I'm like trying to figure out in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not as dumb as I thought I am with some of these puzzles. So that part of it was fun. It is rewarding when you figure that stuff out, I have to say. When you sit back and you take your time and you figure out how to get through a level or how to get up to a platform, and you can see and you can think out loud, oh, I wonder if I do this. Oh, I wonder if I move this platform here. Oh, I wonder if I throw this little thing that makes this lever come down. I wonder if I do all of that I can get to this point that I need to get to and get higher up on these platforms. So figuring that out for me has been cool. And I have not, be honest with you, I have not taken out a guide to do any of this stuff, which is, again, pretty cool. And it's unusual because there's usually points in a game where I get stuck and I have to bring out a guide and kind of see, well, how do I do this? Because I can't really I'm too dumb to figure out how to do this. I've been surprised again by Prince of Persia that I've been able to get through some of these things without looking up a guide. So the story, it's actually it took an interesting twist the last time that I played that I thought was kind of cool. And it was something that I wasn't expecting, because up until that point, the story is so straightforward. So to get a bit of a twist was like, oh, this is interesting. And it was kind of a surprise, because while this game is really about the gameplay of being in a Metroidvania, it's also nice to have this story to go along with it. Now, that being said, I have a feeling, based on the way this game is going and the premise of the story and what's happening in this world, I have a feeling that things that have happened are not what they seem. That's all I'm going to say about that. Because the way they're playing with certain things from a story perspective, I think is kind of interesting. And I'm curious to see kind of where that goes going forward. But yeah, that's all I've been playing. MLB The Show and Prince of Persia. Hopefully Prince of Persia is done relatively soon. I don't know. I will say there's probably a pretty good bet that the next podcast is just going to be about a WrestleMania review or WrestleMania weekend review type situation, because I'm probably not going to play a lot next week. And with it being a short week because of changing of the schedule because of work, that's probably going to have to be the case. But the following weekend, I'm aiming for that weekend to be a big gaming weekend for myself. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to move on to something else. And I'm just going back and forth between Alan Wake 2 and Dead Space. I really don't know which direction I'm going to go in, but when I get there, I'll let y'all know. So that's going to do it for episode 20. Again, 20 episodes in. I can't believe that I've stayed at this for as long as I have. And I don't know. It makes me think I wish I would have done this sooner in many ways. I should have did this 4 years ago during the pandemic. I had the time to do it. Who knows where this could be at this point. And again, I ask that if you are listening to this and if you like it, please share it. I'm hoping that the videos that I make from the recording that I did, that they hopefully get some more people to tune in to the show. That would be nice, but we'll see what happens. But again, if you're listening and you like what you hear, please share. Again, looking forward to WrestleMania this weekend. I will be sharing my thoughts, mostly on Threads and Twitter. I'm really trying to be better on Twitter. I get more engagement on Threads. I mean, which is shocking to me, and it just kind of says about what's going on with Twitter at the moment. But I will be doing a lot of social media posting over the weekend. Let's just put it that way. So that's going to do it. Again, episode 20, Nerd Federation podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see y'all next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.